All right, welcome back, 8th graders. So we're going to take what we've learned in the last couple of lessons about rational, irrational numbers, what we learned in our first chapter or unit, the review when we were working with fractions. So we're going to use that information too, and we're now going to compare in order. So our first slide is comparing. And if you were allowed a calculator, I'd say find your decimals and then compare. But we can't use a calculator. And so actually the easiest way when you can't use a calculator is to square your number. Because the square of this number is what goes into the square root. And then I can compare square roots. So 1 squared is 1. And so then I ask myself, which is bigger, 3 or 1? And 3 is bigger than the square root of 3 is bigger than the square root of 1. And that's what we can do. So if I go over here to B, instead of trying to find the decimal of the square root of 12, I'm going to square the 3 and I get 9. So I'm comparing the square root of 9 with the square root of 12. And so 3 is less than 12. Now, when we're working with a fraction, I can still square this number. I'm going to take my numerator and I'm going to square it. I'm going to square my denominator, so I'm going to end up with 400 over 81, right? So I'm working with the square root of 400 over 81 to get this 29ths. And so I'm really, at this point, I've just got to compare whole numbers unless it's 6, and then I can figure out the fraction from there. I know that 81 goes into 100 once, so I'm estimating that 81 is going to go into 404 times. And so just to double check, I'm going to do 81 times 4. We've got 4. 8 times 4 is 32. So yes, 81 goes into 400 324 times. And so 4. And so now I'm going to compare. I'm working with this, I'm not really dividing there. I'm working with the square root of 4 and something over 81, which really doesn't matter because 6 is greater than 4. And so then 29ths is less than the square root of 6. So again, I'm just squaring numbers so I can compare square roots. Makes it easier. If you could use a calculator, you can compare decimals. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take my 2.6 and I'm going to square it. I'm not going to worry about the negative because I want the negative to stay because it's going to be a negative answer here. And so I'm taking the square root or square. So 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 2 is 12, 13, 14, 15. Placeholder, 2 times 6 is 12, 2 times 2 plus 1, so 4, 5. 6, 5, and 2 is 7, 5 and 1 is 6. We have 2 decimals, so we're working with a negative square root of 6.76 is what we're working with here when we square 26. Now, we have to be careful because these are negative. And because they're negative, the bigger the number, the smaller it actually is. So on this one, even though 7 is bigger than 6, negative 6.76 is greater than negative square root of 7. So the negative square root of 7 is less than negative 2.6. And that's how we compare. And again, if you have a calculator, yes, by all means, you would make them into decimals. But unless you want to do what we were doing in 1.3, where we were making tables, to estimate your square roots as decimals, then your next best bet is to change your numbers and square them and compare the squares together. All right, so now we are comparing or ordering them from least to greatest, and that's, I'm telling you, make everything a square root. So 2 squared would be the square root of 4, or 2 is equal to the square root of 4. I'm going to go over here and do 1.6 times 1.6, so I get 36, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 16, 6, 5, 256. All right, and then two decimals, so 2.56, so this is going to be the square root of 2.56, and 2.8 is my other one, so 2.8 times 2.8, we get 64, 16, and 6, 22, placeholder 16, carry the 1, 4, 5. So 4, 8, 7, 2 decimal places, 2 decimal places. So we're working with the square root of 7.84 because that is the square of 2.8. From here, I'm just going, and I want from least, so I'm going to look for the smallest. Here's 4, 5, 2.56, 2, and 7.84. So square root of 2 is my smallest, which is the square root of 2, comma. So I've used that one. I'm going to cross it out so I know not to use again. My next one is going to be the square root of 256, so that's 1.6 gave me the square root of 256. And after 256, I want the square root of 4, which is 2. And after 4 would come 5, so square root of 5. And then finally my square root is 7.84, which is 2.8. And that's it. All you have to do is multiply and get your squares. And then from there, you just treat what's in the square roots as numbers and put them in order. Just make sure you're reading your directions. Like this one says from least to greatest. This next one's going to say greatest to least. So we're starting with the biggest number and going to the smallest. All right, so I'm going to start by squaring my numbers. So 1.7 times 1.7. 49, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 7, 1, 9, 8, 2 decimal places. So 1.7, I got a negative square root of 2.89 is what I'm looking at there. These are already in square roots, so now I'm going to do 5/3. When we square it, we're going to square both top and bottom, so we're going to have 25 over 9. 9 goes into 25. Here we go. 25 and 9. 9 goes into 25 2 times. Yep, because 3 is 27. And we get 18. Borrow 15, that makes 7. We're going to go ahead and make this into a decimal, and so 0 decimal there, 0. 9 goes into 77 times, which would be 63, and we borrow and we have 7, and so here we know we got square root or 2.7 repeating, and so that is my square root of 2.7 repeating. That's going to help us compare with other numbers. All right, and now we have 17/4, because of course it can't be nice numbers. 17/4, and we square each of those. And do I already have 17 squared on my paper here? Probably not. So we're gonna go with 17 times 17. Oh, which is 289, because we'll just get rid of these decimals and we got 17. So we have 289 on top. 4 squared is 16 on bottom. And then to make it comparable, I'm going to take 289 divided by 16. 16 goes into 28 once. And so 16, 8 minus 6 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. So now we're doing 129. So 16 times 5. I'd start with 5 because then that lets me know which way I need to go. That's 35, 6, 7, 8. So 16 times 5 is 80, so I need to go larger than that. 16 times 7, that's 42. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 112. I'm guessing that that's my ticket right there. So 17, so 112. Oops, I got 7 on the brain. 9 minus 2 is 7. 2 minus 1 is 1. Oh, that tells me that we can actually go in one more time. Go with an 8. 16 times 8. That's 48. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 128. So yes, we would rather go with 8. Actually, we need to go with 8. So 128. We're left with 1. Put our decimal 0. It does not go into 10. Put another 0. 16 goes into 100. 16 times 6 would be 36. 6, 7, 8, 9. 6 times, which is 96, which would leave us with 4. And we could keep going, but 18.06 is enough. So we got a negative square root of 18.06. So that's good enough to compare. All right, so now from here, we're taking our numbers and square roots. We need to start with the biggest numbers. So that's going to be the biggest positive number. So we've got 9, 3, and 2.7 repeating. So 9's our biggest. So square root of 9. From there comes square root of 3. And then my 5/3, which was the square root of 2.7 repeating. And now we want our smallest numbers. Those are going to be our bigger ones. So square root of, or negative square root of 2.89 is our next smallest, so that's a negative 1.7. And then 17 is, negative 17 is bigger than negative 18, so we've got a negative square root of 17. And then negative square root of, oops, not square root, I got ahead of myself, negative 17/4. And that is our order from greatest to least. And yes, it took a little bit of work, but if you think about it, less work than if I had to change all of my square roots into decimals. So that's just one way to go about it. You could also take like 5/3, make that into a decimal, and then square your decimal. That is up to you and whatever you are more comfortable with. If you have questions, let me know. I will see you in class. Until then, 8th graders, deuces.